Milo wasn't the kind of dog people noticed right away. He wasn't a towering shepherd or a sleek hound built for speed. He was a little too shaggy, a little too dusty, and a little too ordinary, if such a word could be used for a creature with eyes like warm honey and a heart that beat with quiet, unwavering loyalty. He was a golden retriever mix, the sort of mutt you might find curled up outside a general store or padding behind a boy on a bicycle. His coat had dulled with age and mud and country air, but his tail wagged with the steady rhythm of someone who had found his purpose and needed nothing more. His ears flopped in uneven ways, and when he ran, he did it with a kind of joyful awkwardness that made even the coldest hearts soften. He belonged to a boy named Evan. Evan was 9 years old and full of questions about stars and trees and why birds didn't get shocked when they stood on power lines. He had a mop of brown hair that refused to lie flat, shoes that were always scuffed, and a laugh that came quick and honest, like summer rain. He lived in a small, weathered cottage nestled at the edge of Finch Hollow, a quiet place where the trees outnumbered the people and secrets lived in the wind. The first time Evan saw Milo, he was sitting on the steps of the old feed store, shivering and soaked after a spring downpour. No collar, no name, just ribs showing and eyes watching everything like he didn't quite trust the world not to disappear on him. Evan didn't ask. He simply sat beside him, pulled the sandwich from his backpack, and tore it in half. Milo had followed him home and never left. They were inseparable after that. Mornings began with Milo's nose nuzzling Evan awake, breath warm and whiskery. Afternoons were spent in the woods, exploring fallen logs and shallow creeks, Milo bounding ahead, Evan shouting behind. Evenings were their favorite time, though. The golden hour, when the light turned syrupy and soft, and the whole world seemed to hush for just a while. That was when they would walk to the oak. It wasn't just any tree, it was their tree, a massive thing, older than anything else in the hollow, with bark like wrinkled leather and limbs that stretched like open arms toward the sky. The oak stood alone on a rise overlooking the river bend and the fields beyond, like a sentinel watching over a forgotten kingdom. Evan called it the thinking tree. It's where the big thoughts come from, he explained one day, lying back against its roots with Milo curled beside him. Like, what happens after dreams? Or why do some people stop smiling? Milo didn't answer, of course, but he listened. He always listened. Sometimes Evan would bring a piece of string and tie little notes to the branches. Wishes, worries, bits of stories he hadn't finished writing. There was one about a pirate raccoon named Captain Snatch, who only stole buttons, and another about a dragon that cried every time it heard a violin. Milo would sit beneath the branches, tail sweeping the grass, watching the boy scribbling hands as if he understood every word. They spent hours there, watching clouds roll by, tossing pebbles into the wind, sharing crackers and dreams. Evan talked about growing up, becoming a writer, moving to the city where people wore suits and always looked busy, but he said he'd come back, always. "You'll be there, right, buddy?" Evan asked one evening, his head resting against Milo's side. Milo thumped his tail once, hard. The boy grinned. "Good, 'cause you're the best part of my story." Then he fell asleep beneath the tree, and Milo stayed awake, watching the stars come out one by one. That was how they lived, small, perfect days wrapped in simple routines. They didn't need anything else. Not really. The world felt wide but manageable, so long as they had each other. Even Evan's parents, busy with work and tired from bills and grown-up things, seemed to understand the magic that happened beneath that oak. They called it his thinking place and never questioned when he vanished there for hours with only Milo and a notebook. But the world has a way of changing when no one's ready, and even the strongest roots can't always hold when the winds start to howl. The night before everything changed, the sky had been thick with stars, bright and endless, like the universe was holding its breath. Evan and Milo had walked to the oak like always. Evan had brought a peanut butter sandwich and a new story idea about a squirrel astronaut. He tied a fresh note to the branch. This one simply said, "Don't forget, I'll come back." Promise Milo watched him do it, head tilted, eyes shining in the moonlight. They stayed late that night. The wind was soft. The world felt safe. The next morning, Evan was gone. No one saw him leave. His bed was still rumpled. His shoes were missing. Milo had barked and whined at the back door, paws scratching the frame. But by the time anyone noticed, Evan was already lost to the woods. Search teams came, dogs, drones, helicopters that beat the sky like angry bees. People in orange vests shouted his name through the trees. Milo ran with them, nose low, tail high, barking at every scent, every trail. But when they stopped looking, when the world moved on, Milo didn't. He returned to the oak tree and waited. The town moved on as towns do. At first, Evan's disappearance clung to Finch Hollow like fog, low and thick and impossible to ignore. The local diner kept his photo taped to the window, and neighbors whispered Evan's name like a prayer, their voices tight and broken. Volunteers combed the woods in shifts, boots crunching through leaves, calling out into the silence. The sheriff said they'd searched every trail, every cave, every patch of underbrush from the river bend to the far hills, but Evan was never found. There was no note, no sign of struggle, no clear path. Just a boy with a notebook, a curious heart, and shoes that had walked too far. Milo had led the search for days, nose to the ground, tail stiff, barking when he caught the scent that still clung faintly to tree trunks and rocks. But it faded, slowly, cruelly, like morning mist. One day there was nothing left for him to follow. The search parties dwindled. The flyers curled and faded on telephone poles. And the whispers changed, from maybe he's hiding to maybe we won't find him at all. Evan's parents held on longer than most, but grief is a weight that folds even the strongest backs. They stopped walking the trails, stopped answering the phone. Their cottage, once filled with laughter and footsteps and the scent of toast and peanut butter, became a place of shadows and silence. Then one morning, the moving truck came. Milo watched from the oak tree as boxes were loaded, watched Evan's bike, rusted with a bent wheel, get tied to the roof of a dusty sedan. He waited as Evan's mother stood in the driveway one last time, her eyes red, her arms wrapped around her own ribs, like they might hold her together if she squeezed tight enough. She looked toward the tree, toward Milo, but didn't call him, didn't say goodbye. The car rolled away down the gravel path, and the dust hung in the air long after the engine's sound had faded. Milo never chased the car. He turned, padded back beneath the wide arms of the old oak, and curled into the hollow where Evan used to sit. And he waited. People tried to take him in. One kind-eyed woman named Margie brought a collar and a bowl of stew, cooing gently as she approached with a blanket in her arms. "You don't have to stay out here, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling in the grass. Milo let her get close, close enough to sniff the food and feel the warmth in her voice. But when she tried to leash him, he backed away, tail low but firm, and settled himself right back at the base of the tree. Another man, old Roy from the post office, built a little lean-to near the roots, left a bed of straw and a tarp to keep the rain off. "If he ain't gonna come down," he said, "he should at least keep dry." Milo used it, sometimes, but he never left. Every evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned that deep bruised blue, Milo rose from his bed and stood facing the trail. Ears forward, eyes searching, waiting. He did this every single day. The seasons spun around him. In the summer, the fields buzzed with cicadas and bees, and the oak's leaves rustled like whispers overhead. Milo would pant beneath the branches, his tongue lolling, eyes half closed until the shadows grew long and cool. In the autumn, golden leaves drifted down like sleepy fire. Milo lay still among them, nearly blending in, his coat the color of fallen things. Sometimes he would nose at the base of the tree where Evan once tied his little paper notes. The wind had taken most of them. Only one remained, faded ink on a crumpled square. "Don't forget, I'll come back." Promise he never touched it. Never let the rain soak it or the wind carry it away. In the winter, the snow buried the field in silence. The oak stood bare, its limbs like bone against the sky. Milo's fur gathered frost, and his breath steamed from his nose like smoke. He moved less then, curled tight in the straw and tarp shelter, conserving heat, conserving hope. But still, every evening, he stood and watched and waited. People began to call him the Watcher of the Oak. Children rode their bikes out from town to see him, to leave treats or whisper stories near the tree. Some of them tied little notes beside Evan's, stories about lost pets, missing brothers, dreams of better days. Milo didn't mind, but he never followed anyone home. He was waiting for one boy, and one boy only. One spring morning, 2 years after Evan vanished, a new family moved into the old cottage. A truck with out-of-state plates, a couple in their 40s, and a girl, maybe 10 or 11, with tangled curls and boots covered in stickers. Her name was Lena. She was the first to spot Milo through the kitchen window. "There's a dog under that big tree," she said, nose pressed to the glass. Her parents glanced over and murmured something about the old story and just leave him be. But Lena couldn't. She was curious the way some kids are, drawn to mystery, to things half told and half forgotten. She packed a bag of jerky and sat cross-legged in the grass near the edge of the rise, far enough not to scare him, close enough that he could hear her voice. "Hi," she said softly. "I don't know your name, but you look like you're waiting for someone." Milo didn't move. She came back the next day, and the next, always with food, always with stories. She didn't try to leash him, didn't try to touch him. She just sat and talked. And slowly, very slowly, Milo's tail began to wag. Just once. But that was enough, because even a heart built on waiting still needs to feel something, once in a while. Lena came every day, rain or shine, cold or heat. After school, after chores, even once when she had the flu and snuck out with a blanket around her shoulders, shivering and determined. She never pushed, never rushed. She just sat near the tree, never right next to Milo, but close enough that her voice could reach him without being too loud, too sudden. She understood something instinctively, that trust wasn't a door you could barge through. It had to open slowly, creaking on old hinges that had rusted in the silence of waiting. Milo watched her, the way only dogs can, quietly, deeply, with those amber eyes that seemed to measure everything. At first, he didn't move when she came. He simply observed. But after a while, he started sitting up when he saw her. Then he started coming a few feet closer, nose twitching as he caught the familiar scent of beef jerky in her backpack. He never ate from her hand, not once, but he let her place the food on the flat stone near the tree, the same spot where Evan used to leave his peanut butter sandwiches. And when she turned her back, he would pad forward and take it, gently, as if it were sacred. Because in some quiet way, it was. Lena talked to him like he was a person, like he wasn't a stray or sad ghost under a tree. She told him about her new school, about how the kids stared because she wore scuffed boots and carried a notebook everywhere. She told him about her mom's garden and how nothing ever grew right, and about her dad who worked too much and smiled too little. She told him about her own dog, Bear, who died in another town, in another life. She even told him secrets, real ones. Like how sometimes she missed her old home so much it felt like she was unraveling, or how she had dreams about forests that whispered names she didn't recognize. And once she was sure she'd heard someone crying in the trees when the wind got loud. Milo never barked, never whined, never moved to nuzzle her hand, but he listened, the way he had listened before, the way he had always listened. And one afternoon, something shifted. It was late spring, and the fields were beginning to shimmer with wildflowers, soft purples and yellows brushing the ankles like whispers. Lena had been reading aloud from her notebook, her legs sprawled, her voice calm. The sky was gold, the kind of slow-fading light that made everything feel like a memory before it was even over. Milo was lying in the grass, just a few feet from her now. He no longer flinched when she moved or turned her head too quickly. She paused in her reading. "I wonder who you're waiting for," she said softly. "People say it's some boy who disappeared. Evan, I think. That he used to live in my house. That he tied notes to this tree and you never stopped coming back." She turned and looked directly at him, her voice barely a whisper now. "Is that true?" Milo blinked slowly. Then, in a movement so gentle it seemed to belong more to a dream than the real world, he stood up, turned toward the massive oak trunk, and lowered his head. He began to dig, not wildly, not frantically, just a quiet, steady motion. Paw, pause, paw again. his body low, his breathing slow. Lena sat up straight, her notebook forgotten. She crawled toward him, heart thudding, her hands brushing aside tufts of moss and clumps of dirt as he scraped away a shallow patch at the tree's base. And there, beneath roots that had twisted for years, she saw something. A scrap of fabric, a piece of twine, and something flat and thin and half-buried, edges worn and cover faded. A notebook, old and water-stained but still intact. Lena's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Milo backed away, sitting quietly watching. The notebook was thick and soft, the pages curled from time and damp. On the inside cover, in careful, childish handwriting, it read, "Property of Evan Carter. If found, please don't read unless you're a tree, a dog, or a best friend." Lena's throat tightened. She sat back, notebook clutched to her chest.
She didn't open it, not yet. Not there. Instead, she looked at Milo. "You saved this?" she asked. He said nothing. But his tail gave a soft, slow wag. That night, Lena read the journal under her quilt with a flashlight, the way kids read secrets and legends. It was filled with drawings, silly, detailed, beautiful. A raccoon pirate. A dancing pine tree. A dog that looked very much like Milo in different poses, guarding, waiting, watching. But there were real things too. Bits of thought. Snippets of truth. "Sometimes I think the forest is watching me. I heard a sound near the ridge today. It wasn't a bear. It sounded like someone breathing. There's a cave past the east hill. I found it once but got scared and ran back. I marked it with a rock shaped like a fish. Maybe I'll go again when I'm braver." Page after page, Lena followed Evan's world, his wonder, his fears, his secrets. And near the end, a map. Hand-drawn, shaky, but clear. It led to a spot past the river, beyond a steep hill. Marked with an X. Next to it, in capital letters. "Milo will find me if I get lost." Lena sat up in bed, the journal pressed against her knees. And for the first time since she'd moved to Finch Hollow, she felt something deep and certain settle in her chest. A truth. A purpose. Evan hadn't just wandered off. He had been looking for something. And Milo had always known where to wait. Lena didn't sleep that night. The journal lay beside her pillow, worn and heavy with meaning, its curled pages whispering secrets even in the dark. She kept flipping to the map, the simple sketch Evan had drawn with a shaky hand and too much hope. A river. A hill. A path winding between two crooked trees. And near the bottom, an X marked with a child's confidence, as if treasure waited there. Or rescue. Or a place to belong. She didn't know what to do at first. Her heart thudded with excitement, but her mind wrestled with caution. She wasn't Evan. She didn't know the forest like he did. And even though she was sure, deep in her bones, that Milo had shown her the journal for a reason, she also knew she couldn't do this alone. So the next morning, she did something she hadn't done in a while. She went to find her grandfather. He lived in a small cottage behind theirs, a little red-roofed place that smelled of tobacco and pine and old leather boots. Her mom called him Grumps, but Lena just called him Pop. He had once been a forest ranger, back when his back was straight and his hair was more pepper than snow. He still kept his maps in tidy drawers and his boots by the back door, like the woods might call him back any day. He was sitting on the porch when she arrived, whittling a stick into the shape of a feather. His hands were knotted and weathered like bark, but his eyes were sharp, full of quiet knowledge. "You look like you've got ghosts chasing your boots," he said, not looking up. "I found something," she said. Or. Milo found it. At the mention of the dog, Pop did look up. "The oak dog?" Lena nodded and sat beside him, pulling the journal from her backpack like it was a sacred text. She handed it over, carefully. Pop took it with more gentleness than she expected. He opened to the first page. Read Evan's name. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. I remember that boy, he murmured. Quiet. Always carrying a notebook. Liked to watch the hawks fly. He flipped through the pages slowly, reading bits aloud. He paused at the drawings, the maps, the wild ideas only a lonely boy could dream up. Then he reached the page with the X. His hand stilled. I know this place, he said quietly. Lena leaned closer. You do? He nodded. That's the East Ridge. Past the old fire trail, where the pines grow crooked and the rocks slope toward the river bend. I haven't been there in years, not since the landslide closed part of the trail. Is it dangerous? Pop gave a slow nod. Could be. There's a cave system back there. Narrow, winding. Not many people know about it. I always meant to report it properly, mark it off. But then life got busy. And then Evan went missing. He looked down at the map again, and his brow furrowed like a cloud gathering rain. You think he went there? Lena asked. Pop didn't answer right away. He ran his thumb along the page, then looked toward the horizon where the trees stood like green waves against the sky. I think that boy had a reason for drawing this map, he said. And I think that dog, he never stopped waiting because he believed Evan was still out there. Lena nodded slowly. Pop handed the journal back. We'll go, he said. Tomorrow morning. Early. When the light's good. But you stick close, and you listen to every word I say. The woods are deep out there. Quiet and old. They remember things we forget. Lena's heart leapt. Really? You'll take me? I will, Pop said, reaching out to pat her hand. But you'd better bring that dog. He knows more than either of us. The next morning was crisp and clear. Dew clung to the grass, and the air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke. Lena stood at the base of the oak in her boots and coat, Evan's journal in her backpack, and her hand stretched out toward Milo. He had come without prompting. As if he had known. He sat under the tree, staring at her, and when she held out her hand, he didn't hesitate. He rose, walked to her side, and stood there, shoulder to leg, steady as ever. Pop arrived with a walking stick and a canvas satchel. He looked at Milo, gave a small nod, and simply said, "Lead the way, boy." They followed the trail marked in the journal, winding through thickets of ferns and up the ridged hills where the pines thinned out and the land sloped harshly. Milo walked ahead, nose low, tail alert. Sometimes he would pause, sniff the air, then choose a turn the map hadn't marked, but Pop let him. Trusted him. Animals remember better than we do, he said. They don't question. They just feel it. The hike was long, the sun rising higher with each step. At times, Lena felt doubt creeping in. What if Evan had never come this way? What if the map was just a child's game? What if the cave was empty? But Milo never wavered. And finally, just past a narrow stretch between two moss-covered boulders, they reached it. The cave. It was low and dark and half concealed by vines and branches. Beside it, half buried in the earth, was a rock shaped exactly like a fish. Just like Evan had written. Lena stared, breath caught in her throat. Pop stepped forward, clearing brush, his expression unreadable. Then he stopped. At the cave's mouth, carved into the stone, was a rough, childish drawing of a dog. A dog with floppy ears. A dog that looked like Milo. And next to it, etched with a stick or maybe a pocket knife, were the words. I'll be here. Waiting. Pop let out a low, shaky breath. Lena knelt beside the carving, her hand trembling as she traced the letters. And Milo? He stepped forward, into the mouth of the cave, slowly, carefully, like he knew the scent still lingered. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply sat. And waited. The cave swallowed sound. Inside, it was cool and still, the kind of stillness that made your breath feel too loud. Moss clung to the walls in patches. Water dripped from somewhere unseen, echoing like a slow clock. It smelled of earth and stone and time. Pop held the flashlight high, the beam sweeping across the cave's interior. The passage wasn't deep, maybe 20 feet at most. The ceiling curved low, and the floor sloped gently downward. At the very back, beneath a ridge of rock that jutted out like a sheltering hand, they found it. A backpack. Faded blue. One strap torn. A keychain shaped like a lightning bolt still dangling from the zipper. Lena froze. Her throat clenched. Pop crouched slowly, reverently. He unzipped the bag, and the smell of old paper and damp cloth spilled out. Inside were the things a boy would carry, a flashlight with dying batteries, a crushed granola bar, a compass, and a folded-up sketch of a tree. The oak. Drawn carefully, lovingly. At the bottom, in messy handwriting. Me and Milo forever. Pop didn't say anything. He just sat back on his heels and bowed his head. Lena took a shaky breath. Her eyes scanned the cave. Near the backpack, tucked beneath a loose pile of pine needles and stones, was something else. A carving. Made from wood, smoothed with care and time. A dog. Its body small and stiff, its shape simple, but the ears were unmistakable. One upright. One flopped. Milo. Lena picked it up gently, brushing away dust and damp leaves. She held it in both hands like something sacred. Beside it, scratched faintly into the rock wall in the same shaky lettering. If I can't make it back, tell Milo I waited too. Lena pressed the carving to her chest. Pop reached out and rested a hand on her shoulder. Looks like he stayed here a while, he said softly. Maybe got trapped when the trail washed out. Or too hurt to make it back. Lena nodded, tears streaking silently down her face. Milo stood at the cave entrance, watching. He didn't cry or move toward the bag. He just sat, ears tilted forward, tail still. He had known. All along, he had known. They didn't speak much on the way home. The forest felt different now, quieter, like it too had exhaled after holding something in for too long. Back at the oak tree, Lena tied something new to the branches. A small note, handwritten in red ink. He waited. So did you. Now it's okay to rest. And she tied the wooden carving beside it. Milo sat beneath the tree that evening, as he always had. But something had shifted. He didn't stare at the trail with the same sharp focus. He didn't listen for phantom footsteps. He closed his eyes. And dozed in the sun. Weeks passed. Summer arrived in golden waves, rippling through the fields, coaxing color back into the world. Lena and Pop held a small ceremony beneath the oak. They buried Evan's journal in a tin box beside the roots, marked with a simple stone etched with a lightning bolt and a paw print. People from the town came. A few remembered the search. Some brought flowers. Others brought silence. Milo sat beside Lena, not leashed, not held, just there. When they left, he didn't stay behind. He followed Lena home. Life slowly changed. Milo slept at the foot of Lena's bed now, snoring softly, his body curled into the shape of comfort. He learned to walk beside her on morning errands, to wait at the school gates when she stayed late, to sit beside her when the world felt too loud. But every evening, just before sunset, Lena opened the back gate. And Milo went to the oak. He didn't stay as long anymore. Sometimes he just sat for a few minutes, nose to the wind, listening. Sometimes he lay in the grass and looked at the branches where paper notes fluttered like whispers. And then he would rise, turn, and trot home, his paws silent on the path. On the first day of autumn, Lena stood at the oak and tied a fresh note. It said, You kept your promise. He came back. And now, he's not waiting alone. She turned to Milo. He wagged his tail once. And together, they walked home, through falling leaves, past fading summer, into a world that had made space again for hope. Epilogue. The oak still stands. Tall. Silent. Watching. Beneath its branches, the notes still rustle in the wind, stories, dreams, pieces of children's hearts tied with ribbon or string. The carving of the little dog remains, weathered but firm, a guardian of the past. Sometimes, a visitor asks about the dog who waits. The locals smile and point toward the trail. He doesn't wait anymore, they say. He found what he was waiting for. And in a cottage not far from that ancient tree, a dog with one floppy ear dozes in the sunlight. Home. At last.